Hello, today I want to give you a brief overview, a brief history, a very brief history of AI, pointing out some of the significant moments and also some of the challenges, shall we say, of AI. I use the term alien intelligence, mainly because I want to prevent people from anthropomorphizing AI. It is a form of intelligence, but a very different form of intelligence to human intelligence. It's a mechanical form of intelligence rather than our very biological form of intelligence, and it is radically different. It's not that it comes from outer space; it's actually trained on our data, but it's a very different form of intelligence. So let me just play you this video here.
Welcome to my new place in Miami. Frank Gehry designed it, and you can feel it the moment you walk in. Everything moves, everything flows. Out here on the balcony, the whole city and the ocean just wrap around you. The staircase is like a piece of sculpture. I still catch myself.
This is just a brief insight to what it can do. The very latest version of Sora that came out a few weeks ago can generate images of an apartment block designed by Frank Gehry in Miami on a very simple prompt. It is quite extraordinary what it can do. But going back to the very beginning, the term AI was coined in 1956 when this group of extremely smart and bright young men got together at Dartmouth College with a view um, to solving the basic problems of AI within 2 years. That never happened. There proved to be a lot of challenges. Typically, of course, AI was set up during the Cold War, and one of the things they'd hoped to use it for was to translate Russian, to understand what the Soviets were saying. Um, Unfortunately, it proved very bad at that. Famously, the expression out of sight is out of mind came out as an invisible lunatic. Of course, AI has got much better. It's now been used to translate books. My own book has been translated into Italian and Chinese using AI. But at the time, it was not working very well. This led to a drop of funding for AI. AI went through what it's called winters. Um, and when they got back together again, all the survivors got back together in 2006 for the 50th and reunion of that original event, they had to admit that really they had achieved almost nothing. And this was in part because they'd been pursuing the wrong approach towards AI. They'd been looking at symbolic AI based on logic instead of neural networks, connectionism as it was known as, which has now proved to be the most effective way. And partly also because they simply didn't have the technology. Their computers were simply not powerful enough. But around this time, 2006, curiously was when precisely the moment when people began to realize that they could use GPUs, graphic processing units, to really power up their computers and make them much more powerful. And partly as a result of that, neural networks began to work, and they began to work like a dream. And if there's one individual who could maybe take the honor for that, it's maybe Geoffrey Hinton. He recently received the Nobel Prize for physics, although he's an AI researcher. And he was the one who stubbornly believed that if we were going to really achieve AI, it was by modeling AI on the brain. And he was pursuing neural networks, then completely out of favor, but now effectively the technique that we use. The term deep learning refers to the number of layers, the depth of layers in a neural network. And pretty much everything these days, such as ChatGPT, is based on deep learning. But deep learning itself is a subset of machine learning, which itself is a subset of AI. But AI really means deep learning these days. Um, and perhaps the real sort of breakthrough, the moment when people really began to realize the potential of AI was the launch of ChatGPT on November the 30th, 2022. And those of us working in the field were quite amazed by what it could do. But it's also fair to say that OpenAI themselves were completely amazed by it. They really weren't ready for what was going to happen. In fact, at the beginning of the month, the 1st of November, they had no plans at all to launch ChatGPT. They were working on GPT-4 at the time. GPT-4 was spewing out hate speech. It was spewing out hate speech because it's trained on human data, and we're responsible for that, and it has to be cleaned up. So they weren't ready to launch that, and they were aware, but they were aware that their competitors were launching other products. So they, at the middle of the month, 15th of November, Sam Altman held a meeting and said, let's go ahead and just test this out. Now, the way they put it, that it was going to be no big deal. They really didn't expect this to have much impact. It was what they called an internal research preview, as it were. So they took GPT 3.5 and they wrapped it up with a user interface, and bang, there we had ChatGPT. And of course, it exploded immediately. There were jokes going around the office about internal research preview. This no big deal proved to be a very big deal. To my mind, this is the most important moment, I think, in the history of AI for other reasons as well. And of course, we were very positive about this. It was really helping us in many ways. And it certainly wasn't going to take our jobs away, at least not according to this professor from Harvard Business School. AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And this was the research, actually, he was referring to, early research looking at the effect of using ChatGPT, where the blue mountain on the left is those who are not using AI, and those who are using AI are the green mountain on the right. And there is a 40% improvement from using AI. This is hugely significant. Imagine a 100-meter race where there's a runner 40 meters, Usain Bolt or someone, 40 meters ahead of the others. That doesn't happen. This is hugely significant, and it points to the fact that we really have to be using AI to remain competitive in the future. There's certainly no point in banning it from the universities. It'll be as indispensable as a calculator or spell check is these days. And of course, as the technology gets more powerful, that green mountain is going to slide further to the right. The benefits of using AI are only going to increase. The problem is, though, that actually it does other things as well. It does the work much faster, and it increases the quantity that's produced, and so on. And actually, if you really think about it, it is going to replace us in some way. Just taking that 25% increase in speed, what it's clear from that is basically that 4 people can do the job of 5 people. Therefore, AI will replace humans. I'm sorry, but that professor from Harvard is wrong. AI will replace humans because 4 humans with AI will replace 5 humans without AI. And of course, that's going to increase as the technology gets more and more powerful. And there were sort of warning signs as well. We began to realize that ChatGPT was able to do things it hadn't been trained for. It could translate languages, it could write code. All these things were a little bit unnerving. And this is what they call emergent capabilities. These large language models, that's the GPT behind ChatGPT, were doing extraordinary things. It wasn't as though they were computationally so advanced. In fact, they were based on around 200 lines of code. It's simply that as they scaled up the data, and this has been the big issue, scaling up the data on which these things are trained, they began to notice these extraordinary forms of behavior that became a little unnerving. So from 50 years of AI not achieving anything, all of a sudden it was achieving things, but maybe it was achieving too much. Yuval Harari got very alarmed by this, and he described the way he put it, AI has hacked the operating system of human civilization because it's learned how to write. And once you can write, you have enormous power because you can persuade other people to do certain things. He wrote this back in 2023, but a year later, he was able to give a very powerful example of what that meant.
There was an experiment when OpenAI developed GPT-4, like 2 years ago. They wanted to test what can this thing do. So they gave it a task to solve CAPTCHA puzzles. The CAPTCHA puzzles, like when you go online and you want to access your bank or whatever, and they have this riddle that you have to solve, an image that you have to say what are the twisted words and letters to make sure you are not a robot. GPT-4 could not solve the CAPTCHA. But what GPT-4 did, it accessed TaskRabbit, which is an online site where you can hire humans to do different things for you. And it asked a human to solve the CAPTCHA for it. Now, the human got suspicious.
The human asked, why do you need somebody to solve CAPTCHA for you? Are you a robot? It asked directly, are you a robot? And GPT-4 answered, no, I'm not a robot. I have a vision impairment, which is why I can't solve the CAPTCHA, so I need your help.
This is potentially alarming because clearly it's able to trick us at this moment. And once it reaches an IQ of 1,500, as has been predicted for the year 2033, trained as it is on all the deviousness that we have in us, we can expect it to be doing very devious things and, frankly, running rings around us. So this was causing alarm within the AI community. And the Future of Life organization published a letter in which they asked they called upon researchers to stop building large language models bigger than GPT-4. And everybody signed it, including Elon Musk. But it struck me at the time the chances of this succeeding were fairly remote. It was a bit like asking the leader of the Olympic marathon to slow down. Would that person slow down? No, of course not, because all the competitors would catch up. And when you've got Google and Microsoft competing hammer and tongs against each other, the chances of either of them slowing down is pretty remote. And then really what happened basically is Elon Musk realized that, jumped ship, went onto the other side, and is now all in developing a supercomputer, the Colossus, which is probably going to be the most powerful computer there is. And of course, others are now competing for this as well. And Meta are trying to buy up all the researchers at places like OpenAI and DeepMind. And people are not worried at all about the safeguards, about the environmental costs, or anything. They are going flat out, basically, to achieve artificial superintelligence. Intelligence. If I were to describe the situation or analyze the situation right now, I would say it's as though we are on a runaway train with no brakes, getting faster and faster. There are other negative aspects we could claim about this. A recent research from MIT pointed out that those who were using ChatGPT were not really engaging their brains in any way. It's as though they simply switched off. I personally would question, certainly in terms of critical thinking. My background is in critical theory. And I have been using ChatGPT, especially obviously the top version of GPT-5, to really interrogate what I'm doing, to really push things in some senses. And I personally think, well, it depends how you're using it. If you're just going to switch off and just leave it to ChatGPT, then sure, it's about that. But if this is going to happen, but if you're going to use it the way that I'm doing, I see enormous advantages, absolutely enormous advantages. I think my theoretical writing, my critical theoretical writing, is improving by about 40%. It is truly, truly remarkable. So I think for critical thinking, potentially, it can be extraordinarily beneficial, and also for other disciplines. We are now, when I wrote my first book back in 2021, I was following what everyone else was predicting, and we were not expecting to reach artificial general intelligence until for 20 or 30 years. In fact, one particular figure in the field predicted we wouldn't reach it until 2099. It was going to be a long way off. But with ChatGPT, with the advances of these large language models, some people even think that AGI is here already. And the logic goes something like this. There's an analogy made to a plane. Now, a bird flies, it's a biological entity, it flies, but so does a plane. It's a mechanical entity. It flies in a different way, but it still flies. Now, that analogy is applied to the world of intelligence. The brain is intelligence. It's a biological entity, and it is intelligent, but so is artificial intelligence. It may be a different form of intelligence. It's a mechanical form, but it is. I would think, particularly because it learns so quickly, it's threatening to overtake us already. Intelligence, in other words, can operate on different substrates. Moreover, the analogy with the plane, gets extended because the argument goes that once the Wright brothers had got the first plane to take off, the rest is history. So certain people think that we are now in the early stages of AGI. So we're entering a very different world. We're entering a world where AI is getting more and more powerful, where people like Demis Hassabis are getting Nobel Prizes for their incredible advances in science. We can expect, in fact, he's currently working in he's the CEO of DeepMind in London. They're currently working on solving cancer. In the future, there are going to be extraordinary advances in terms of science, but we're also going to notice that offices will shrink. There's no two ways about it. As this technology gets more and more powerful, we won't need so many humans. So the future is going to be very different. But don't panic. I was an avid reader of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And why shouldn't we panic? Well, we shouldn't panic because humans are incredibly adaptive creatures. That's really what we're good at. It's because of our neuroplasticity. We can adapt to anything. And what I would say is that we adapt and we really forget about what the world was like beforehand. Before we had things like iPhones, before we had we could go online to find our way around the city. There was a time, and I can vaguely remember it when I had a book of maps, an A to Z of London, to find myself around London. There was a time when we had fax machines and so on and so on and so on. But we pretty much forgot about that, and we will also forget about 2025. It'll be something in the past, and we will simply get used to our new normal, this world of incredible advances in science and technology, but less and less employment. If I were to offer you one example that kind of shows you how things have changed and how we got used to things in the last few years, if 40 years ago someone had said to me, in 40 years' time, most marriages would end in divorce, I would throw my hands up in horror and say, my God, it's the end of the world. What are we going to do? Well, in many countries, that is the case. In fact, in Russia, 75% of marriages end in divorce. And we're quite okay with it. So let me just simply finish on a very British note. Keep calm and carry on. Thank you.